Welcome back. Tonight, we're experiencing the complete story of Subnautica, a silent descent into an alien ocean, where survival becomes understanding. Relax and let the story unfold. The ancient past, the architects. Long before humanity reached the stars, in an age measured not in centuries, but in epochs, there existed a species known as the architects. These beings were ancient beyond measure, their civilization spanning more than 1 billion years into the depths of time. They were masters of technology that seemed like magic, capable of bending space itself, storing consciousness as pure data, and engineering life at the genetic level. The architects were explorers by nature, driven by an insatiable curiosity about the universe. They traveled from world to world, building a vast network that connected distant planets through gates that folded space. On their journeys, they collected knowledge, technology, and relics from countless civilizations, some even older than themselves. They learned to upload their minds, freeing themselves from the limitations of mortal flesh. They learned to craft new bodies from the genetic material of multiple species, reshaping themselves as needed. But for all their power and wisdom, the architects were not immune to tragedy. During one of their routine expansions into unexplored space, the architects discovered something terrible on an unknown world far from their home. It was a bacterium, microscopic and unremarkable in appearance, but possessed of a lethality that defied comprehension. They called it Kara. The architects had protocols for such discoveries, quarantine procedures, containment systems, fail-safes built upon fail-safes. But something went wrong. A network error, a moment of oversight, a crack in their perfect system. The Kara escaped containment. What followed was devastation on a scale the architects had never known. The bacterium spread through their network like wildfire through dry grass. It entered through the skin, shut down immune systems, and rewrote the genetic code of every organism it touched. The architects, with their interconnected nature, were particularly vulnerable. Kara tore through their population with merciless efficiency. The death toll climbed beyond imagination. 143 billion confirmed deaths on their core worlds alone. Entire planets fell silent. The greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known teetered on the brink of extinction. In desperation, the architects quarantined their core worlds and established research facilities across the galaxy. They needed a cure, and they needed it before their species vanished from the universe forever. Planet 4546. B, a research outpost. 1,000 years before the events that would unfold in the crater, the architects came to a water world in a distant arm of space. They designated it Planet 4546b. The planet was almost entirely oceanic, with only a few scattered islands breaking the surface of its endless seas. Beneath those waters lay an ecosystem of remarkable diversity, from shallow coral reefs bathed in sunlight to deep trenches where bioluminescent creatures drifted through the darkness. The architects chose this world for several reasons. It was remote, isolated from their core territories. It possessed a diverse biosphere that might hold the key to understanding Kara. And perhaps most importantly, it contained something extraordinary: the Sea Emperor Leviathan. These massive creatures, among the largest and most intelligent life forms in the known galaxy, possessed a unique property. Their bodies naturally produce an enzyme, which the architects designated as Enzyme 42, that appeared to counteract the effects of Kara. It was not perfect, not yet, but it represented hope. The architects established multiple facilities across the planet's ocean floor. They built a disease research facility in a deep biome where they could study the bacterium in relative isolation. They constructed a massive quarantine enforcement platform on a mountain island, a weapon system designed to shoot down any vessel attempting to leave the planet, ensuring Kara could not spread beyond this world. They erected an alien thermal plant deep in the planet's volcanic regions to power their installations. They built smaller structures too, caches for supplies, sanctuaries to preserve their consciousness, teleportation gates to move quickly between locations, and testing facilities where they could conduct their research. The architects captured a Sea Emperor Leviathan an ancient female, and brought her to the primary containment facility within the disease research facility. They studied her, analyzed her enzymes, and made an unsettling discovery. The adult sea emperor produced enzyme 42, but in an unstable form that provided only temporary relief from Kara's symptoms. The architects needed a stable version, a permanent cure. The answer lay in her eggs. Juvenile sea emperors produced a potent, stable form of enzyme 42 that could permanently cure the infection. But the sea emperor would not reproduce in captivity. The architects tried everything. They studied her biology, analyzed her behavior, created optimal conditions for breeding. Nothing worked. In the facility, an architect named Al-An, one of their lead researchers, made a fateful decision. Without proper authorization, Al-An attempted to artificially hatch the sea emperor's eggs. To do so, Al-An acquired sea dragon leviathan eggs, massive creatures that dwelled in the deepest volcanic zones of the planet. The sea dragons, discovering their eggs had been taken, were not pleased. One of the adult sea dragons attacked the disease research facility, its massive body smashing through the structure's walls. The facility ruptured. Containment failed. Khara, which the architects had kept carefully isolated, poured into the surrounding ocean. The infection spread rapidly through the planet's ecosystem. Species after species succumbed to the bacterium. The waters that had once teemed with diverse life became increasingly barren as Khara rewrote the genetic codes of countless organisms or simply killed them outright. The free-roaming populations of sea emperors began to die, not from infection, but from starvation as their food sources vanished. The architects activated their emergency quarantine. The quarantine enforcement platform came online, its ancient weapon systems scanning the skies, ready to destroy any ship that attempted to enter or leave the planet's atmosphere. The remaining architects on 4546b grew desperate. They created warpers, semi-organic entities designed to hunt down and destroy infected creatures, attempting to contain the spread of Khara. It was not enough. The bacterium was everywhere, in the water, in the sediment, in the very air that misted off the ocean's surface. One by one, the architects on 4546b succumbed to the disease. Some uploaded their consciousness to storage facilities, hoping to wait out the crisis. Al-An, racked with guilt over the role in the disaster, uploaded into a data storage facility in the Arctic regions of the planet, a place that would later be called Sector Zero. The lone sea emperor Leviathan remained imprisoned in her aquarium, ancient and dying, her eggs still unhatched. She could sense the devastation around her, could feel the ocean growing quieter as life after life winked out. In her captivity, she began training the peepers, small fish that the architects had brought to her tank. She taught them to carry trace amounts of her enzymes through vents that connected her prison to the outside ocean. It was not enough to cure the infection, not nearly enough, but it slowed the spread. It kept some life clinging to existence in the waters around the crater. The peepers became the planet's inadvertent saviors, swimming through the darkness with their precious cargo. The millennia passed slowly. The architect facilities, built to last forever, continued their automated functions. The quarantine enforcement platform remained active, its power supplied by the still-functioning thermal plant. The Sea Emperor waited in her prison, counting the centuries. The ocean, though diminished, endured. The mid-22 end century, humanity's expansion. On Earth, in the distant past, dolphins swam the planet's oceans. At some point, they went extinct. It was one of many species humanity would lose. In the mid-22 ND century, a defense manufacturing company called Altera Corporation began its rise to prominence. What started as a startup would eventually grow into a trans-governmental entity, a corporation with power rivaling that of nations. Altera became the official supplier for the Trans-System Federation, providing weapons, technology, and infrastructure for humanity's expansion into space. The expansion was not peaceful. Factions warred among the stars, competing for resources and territory. But Altera, with its monopoly on critical weapon systems, held tremendous leverage. Threatened with having their weapon supplies cut off, the warring factions reluctantly signed the charter, bringing an uneasy peace to human space. As humanity spread across the galaxy, Altera was there, building phasgates that allowed faster-than-light travel between star systems, establishing colonies, mining asteroids, and exploring new worlds. The company's motto was simple: technology for a better tomorrow. But beneath that idealistic veneer was a corporation that valued profit above all else. In this era of expansion, a Mongolian vessel named the Degasi set out on a routine journey. It was owned by the Torgal Corporation, and aboard was Paul Torgal, the majority shareholder and captain. Paul was 79 years old, beneficiary of life extension technologies that had become available to the wealthy. With him was his son, Bart Torgal, 19 years old and recipient of advanced cerebral implants that had accelerated his education in biochemistry and stellar economics. Bart was being transported to a newly constructed deep space station where he would serve 5 years as chief operating officer. Paul had also hired Marguerite Maida, a 42-year-old mercenary with a complicated history. She had served in the Mongolian Defense Forces and later the Trans-System Federation, from which she had been dishonorably discharged 15 years prior for refusing to complete a classified mission. Despite her disgrace, or perhaps because of it, she had a reputation as someone who could handle herself in dangerous situations. The Degasi's crew consisted of 6 people in total, though only these 3 would matter in the end. The journey was routine until Paul made a decision. Passing near planet 4546b, an uncharted ocean world, Paul detected mineral deposits on its surface. He saw an opportunity for profit, a chance to claim resources that could be developed later. Against protocol, Paul ordered the Degasi to perform a scanning pass of the planet. It was a decision that would cost them everything. As the Degasi entered orbit, the quarantine enforcement platform detected the vessel. Ancient protocols activated. Weapon systems came online. A pulse of focused energy lanced up from the planet's surface and struck the Degasi. The ship's systems failed catastrophically. Paul managed a controlled descent, but controlled was a relative term. The Degasi crashed into the ocean, tearing apart on impact. 4 of the 6 crew members died immediately. Paul, Bart, and Marguerite survived, finding themselves in life pods, drifting on an alien ocean during a massive storm. For days, they remained in their pods, waiting for the weather to clear, not knowing if they were alone or if any others had survived. The Degasi survivors, when the storms finally passed, the 3 survivors could see a large landmass in the distance, a floating island suspended in the air by massive floater organisms attached to its underside. They made their way to the island and began to salvage what they could from the wreckage of the Degasi. The island seemed like a gift. It had land, soil, and the possibility of growing food. Paul wanted to stay there, to wait for rescue. It was safe, he argued. There were no predators on the island. They could establish a sustainable base and hold out until someone came for them. Marguerite disagreed. She had explored the waters around the island and found them rich with resources. More importantly, she had found a purple alien tablet in the sand, proof that they were not the first to visit this planet. Something had built structures here, and Marguerite wanted to know what had shot them down. The debate between Paul and Marguerite would define their time on the planet. Paul represented caution and authority, the voice of experience and corporate thinking. Marguerite represented action and defiance, the instinct to confront danger rather than hide from it. Bart, caught between them, tried to keep both alive while conducting his own research into the planet's ecosystem. They built their first habitat on the floating island using materials salvaged from the Degasi. They constructed observation platforms where Bart could study the local flora and fauna. They created grow beds and planted what seeds they had, marble melons and Chinese potato plants. For a brief time, it seemed like they might survive, but the island could not support them indefinitely. Storms flooded their grow beds. The natural growth rates were too slow. They did not have enough building materials to construct more grow beds. A landslide buried part of their habitat. Marguerite continued to push for exploring deeper waters. Paul continued to resist, but his authority had died with the Degasi. Even he had to admit that Marguerite was right about the resources. If they were going to survive, they needed to get their feet wet. They moved to the Jellyshroom Caves, a biome deep enough to be protected from surface storms, but still within relatively safe depths. There, surrounded by giant mushroom-like plants that glowed with bioluminescence, they built their second base. The caves were rich in lithium and other materials. Paul even began to dream about building a mine here if they were ever rescued, turning their disaster into profit. In the Jellyshroom Caves, Bart's relationship with Marguerite developed. She helped him with his research, capturing specimens for him to study. When she found alien tablets in her explorations, she brought them to Bart, trusting his scientific mind to understand what they meant. Bart, for his part, found Marguerite's enthusiasm infectious. She treated him with respect, as an equal, which was more than his father often did. But the Jellyshroom Cave's base had problems. The structure began leaking. Water seeped through seals and flooded compartments, and Bart's sensors began detecting something concerning. He picked up readings that suggested they were infected with some kind of pathogen. The symptoms were subtle at first: flu-like feelings, fatigue, skin irritation. But Bart, with his advanced training in biochemistry, recognized that this was no ordinary illness. Marguerite took extreme measures to gather specimens for Bart to study. She wrestled stalkers, dangerous predators with powerful jaws, and forcibly extracted their teeth. She ventured deeper, searching for answers about what had shot them down and what was making them sick. Eventually, Marguerite found what she was looking for: evidence of a massive alien facility deeper below. She insisted they establish a base there, in the deep Grand Reef, directly beneath the floating island. Paul was less enthusiastic. The deep Grand Reef was dangerous, far below safe diving depths, surrounded by hostile creatures. His doubts about Marguerite's judgment had been growing. The arguments between them had become more frequent and more heated. Marguerite accused Paul of cowardice. Paul accused Marguerite of recklessness. Bart tried to mediate, but increasingly found himself siding with Marguerite. They built their third and final base in the deep Grand Reef. There, in the darkness, surrounded by eerie rock formations and bioluminescent life, they continued their research. Bart intensified his studies of the pathogen. Marguerite continued her aggressive specimen gathering. Then Marguerite made a decision that would end everything. She encountered a Reaper Leviathan, one of the largest and most dangerous predators on the planet. Rather than fleeing, she engaged it in combat. Somehow, through a combination of skill, stubbornness, and sheer audacity, she managed to wound it severely. She dragged the nearly dead Reaper back to their base, intending to deliver it to Bart for study. But Marguerite had not noticed that a second Reaper Leviathan had followed her. This one was not wounded. This one was very, very angry. The second Reaper attacked the deep Grand Reef base, its massive jaws tearing through the structure. The habitat ruptured, water flooded in. Paul was thrown clear and found himself in the open ocean, watching as Marguerite grabbed a piece of jagged metal and jammed it into the attacking Reaper's neck, clinging to the creature as it thrashed. That was the last time anyone saw Marguerite alive, at least for a long time. Paul, disoriented and running out of oxygen, spotted strange lights deeper below. Perhaps delirious, perhaps hoping for salvation, he swam toward them. He likely died within minutes, drowning in the deep water or falling prey to the crab squids that lived in those depths. Bart alone escaped. He managed to make his way back to the original base on the floating island. There, alone and dying from the infection, he recorded one final log in the Western Observatory. The Kara, as the architects had called it, claimed him as it had claimed so much other life on this planet. But Marguerite did not die. The Reaper Leviathan she had attacked eventually succumbed to its wounds, but not before carrying her far across the ocean. When it finally died, its body floated to the surface in a far northern region of the planet, an Arctic zone that would later be designated Sector 0. Marguerite, battered and near death, managed to survive inside the Reaper's ribcage. She used its fat for fire, its meat for food. She built shelters from its bones And somehow, impossibly, Margaret Maida lived. The Aurora mission. A decade after the Degasi disappeared, Altera Corporation dispatched the Aurora, a massive capital ship with a crew of 157. The Aurora had a primary mission: to construct a phase gate in the Ariadne Arm, in the system containing planet 4546b. This would establish a faster-than-light connection to that region of space, facilitating further exploration and colonization. But the Aurora had a secondary mission, one known only to certain members of the crew. They were to search for and, if possible, rescue the crew of the Degasi. The ship's disappearance 10 years prior had created a political problem for Altera. Paul Torgal had been a powerful figure in the Mongolian states, and his son Bart had been groomed for leadership. Their loss had to be investigated. Aboard the Aurora was Jochi Kasar, an employee of the Torgal Corporation's insurance department assigned to aid in the search. The ship also carried specialized deep-sea exploration equipment, just in case. Among the Aurora's crew was Riley Robinson, who held the position of non-essential systems maintenance chief. Despite the impressive title, Riley's role was less glamorous than it sounded. He was essentially responsible for maintaining systems that were not critical to the ship's operation. Some crew members jokingly referred to him as a janitor, but Riley did his job competently and kept his head down. The Aurora's journey to planet 4546b took over a year. The crew settled into routines, maintained the ship, prepared for the phase gate construction. They approached the planet, preparing for a gravity slingshot maneuver that would position them in the correct orbit. No one aboard the Aurora knew about the quarantine enforcement platform. No one knew that every ship that had approached this planet for the past 1,000 years had been destroyed. No one suspected that beneath the pristine blue ocean lay automated weapon systems still following ancient protocols. As the Aurora entered the planet's gravity well, the quarantine enforcement platform detected it. Systems that had waited a decade since the Degasi came online once more. Targeting solutions were calculated, energy built up in firing chambers. A pulse of concentrated energy struck the Aurora's engineering section. The damage was catastrophic. Primary systems failed, secondary systems failed, fires erupted throughout the ship. The drive core, destabilized by the impact, began an uncontrolled reaction that would lead to a massive explosion. The captain gave the evacuation order. Crew members raced to the life pod bays. Panic and confusion reigned. 25 life pods launched into the atmosphere as the Aurora fell toward the ocean below. Riley Robinson ran through smoke-filled corridors, alarms blaring in his ears. He reached Life Pod 5 and threw himself inside. The pod launched, its emergency thrusters firing, carrying him away from the dying Aurora. Inside the cramped pod, Riley struggled with the controls, trying to stabilize the descent. A panel came loose, struck him in the head, and everything went dark. Alone in the shallows, Riley woke 3 hours later to the smell of smoke. His head pounded. His life pod's interior was on fire. Moving on instinct, still disoriented, he grabbed a fire extinguisher and put out the flames. When his head cleared, Riley activated the life pod systems. His PDA, a handheld device that served as his computer, scanner, and survival guide, booted up in emergency mode. A calm, synthetic voice informed him that he had crash-landed on an alien world and that the PDA now had one directive: to keep him alive. Riley opened the life pod's hatch and looked out at planet 4546b. Endless ocean stretched in every direction, its surface reflecting a sky of alien blue. The Aurora, or what remained of it, lay burning in the distance, its massive hull partially submerged, smoke pouring into the atmosphere. Closer at hand, strange fish swam through clear water. Unusual plants grew on the ocean floor visible below. The PDA helpfully informed Riley that the local water was safe to filter and drink, that the atmosphere was breathable, and that he should begin gathering resources immediately if he wanted to survive. Riley had no better ideas. He dove into the water. The shallows around his life pod teemed with life. He saw fish he would come to know as peepers, their distinctive eye markings giving them their name. He saw bladderfish drifting lazily. He saw long, serpentine stalkers patrolling the kelp forests that grew in dense clusters on the seafloor. His PDA began cataloging everything, building a database of the local ecosystem. Riley gathered basic resources: limestone for copper, sandstone for silver, acid mushrooms for battery acid, creepvine for silicone rubber. His PDA contained blueprints for basic survival equipment, and he began fabricating tools: a knife, a scanner, a flashlight, an air pump, and basic air tank to extend his diving time. As the day wore on, Riley's PDA detected signals from other life pods. Hope surged. He was not alone. Other survivors had made it down, but the hope was short-lived. When Riley reached the nearest life pod, he found it empty, or its occupants dead. One by one, he checked the signals, and one by one, he found only bodies and abandoned pods. Some had been attacked by predators. Some had suffered equipment failures. Some had simply run out of resources. Riley's PDA also began detecting something else: high levels of waterborne bacteria. An unknown pathogen present in the water, in the fish, in everything. The PDA noted it, but could provide little information. It was unlike any bacterium in its database. Unknowingly, with his first swim in these waters, Riley Robinson had become infected with Kara, distress, and destruction. Days passed. Riley established routines. He built a small base near his life pod, using habitat builder technology to construct storage and fabrication facilities. He explored cautiously, mapping the biomes around him. He discovered the kelp forests, the grassy plateaus, the coral reefs. He encountered creatures both beautiful and terrifying. Then, 1 week after the crash, the Aurora's drive core exploded. The detonation was massive, visible across the entire crater. Riley, from his life pod, watched as a mushroom cloud rose into the sky and radiation began spreading into the surrounding ocean. But the explosion also accomplished something unexpected. The Aurora's communication system, damaged in the crash, had not been able to send any distress signals. But the explosion created an electromagnetic pulse detectable across star systems. Far away, a trading ship named the Sunbeam picked up the signal. The Sunbeam's captain, Avery Quinn, made contact with Riley via radio. Quinn explained that the Sunbeam was in the area and could attempt a rescue. It would take them a few days to reach planet 4546b, but they were coming. Quinn transmitted coordinates for a rendezvous point on Mountain Island, one of the few large landmasses on the planet. For the first time since the crash, Riley felt hope. He was going to be rescued. He just had to survive a few more days. Riley continued his exploration, building better equipment, venturing into deeper waters. He found more remnants of the Aurora scattered across the ocean floor. He discovered the abandoned bases of the Degasi survivors, reading their logs, piecing together their tragic story. He began to understand that the Degasi had been shot down by something on the planet, and that the same fate had befallen the Aurora. The day of the Sunbeam's arrival came. Riley made his way to Mountain Island, a large volcanic mountain rising from the ocean. He waited at the designated coordinates, watching the sky. The Sunbeam descended through the atmosphere, its engines burning bright. Riley could see it clearly, so close. Salvation just minutes away. Then the mountain behind him began to glow. Massive structures that Riley had not noticed activated. Energy built up in weapon systems that had been hidden in the mountainside. Targeting systems locked onto the Sunbeam. Riley screamed a warning, but there was nothing he could do. The quarantine enforcement platform fired. A pulse of energy lanced up from the planet's surface and struck the Sunbeam directly. The ship exploded, breaking apart in the atmosphere. Debris rained down into the ocean. Riley stood alone on Mountain Island, watching the wreckage fall. As the magnitude of the situation became clear, he was not getting off this planet. Not unless he could somehow deactivate that weapon, the mountain's secret. Riley explored Mountain Island, his PDA scanning the alien structures. They were ancient, far beyond human technology. The main structure was the quarantine enforcement platform itself, a massive weapon built into the mountainside. But there were other structures too. A gate of some kind, covered in alien symbols. Riley found an entrance to the gun platform. Inside, the technology was active, lights still glowing after centuries. His PDA worked to translate the alien language, slowly building an understanding of the symbols and text. In the gun's control room, Riley discovered the truth. The weapon was a quarantine system. It had been activated approximately 1,000 years prior to prevent the spread of a bacterial infection. Any ship attempting to leave or enter the planet's atmosphere would be destroyed. The weapon would remain active until the infection was eliminated or the weapon was manually disabled. The control panel rejected Riley's attempts to deactivate it. A scan revealed why. Riley himself was infected with the bacterium. The system was designed to prevent infected individuals from leaving the planet. Until he was cured, the weapon would not allow him to turn it off. The control panel did provide some information. It gave approximate coordinates for something called the Disease Research Facility, where research into the infection had been conducted. If Riley wanted a cure, he would find it there. Riley also discovered that the alien gate was a teleporter. After some experimentation with alien tablets he had found, he managed to activate it. The gate transported him to another island, a floating island held aloft by massive floaters. There, he found more Degasi structures and more pieces of their story. But more importantly, he now had a direction. If he wanted to escape the planet, he needed to cure his infection. To do that, he needed to venture deeper into the ocean than he had ever gone before. The depths. Riley began his descent into the planet's true depths. He built a Seamoth, a small submarine that could dive to 200 meters. Later, he constructed a Cyclops, a massive submarine capable of going much deeper. He created a prawn suit, a walking mech designed for extreme depths and high-pressure environments. As he ventured deeper, the ocean changed. The sunny shallows gave way to darker waters. Bioluminescence became more common. The creatures became larger and more dangerous. Riley encountered crab squids that could disable his electronics with electromagnetic pulses. He navigated around warpers, strange entities that could teleport and seemed to be hunting infected creatures. He narrowly avoided ghost leviathans, massive translucent serpents that guarded certain territories. His PDA detected an entrance to a massive cave system called the Lost River. Riley navigated through narrow passages into an enormous cavern filled with green brine, bone fields from long-dead leviathans, and an eerie silence broken only by the movements of strange creatures adapted to the darkness. In the Lost River, Riley found more alien facilities. He discovered caches containing technologies beyond human comprehension. Ion crystals that held incredible amounts of energy, advanced alien materials, and more data terminals that slowly revealed the story of what had happened here. The architects had come to this planet searching for a cure to a plague that had devastated their civilization. They had established research facilities. They had found a potential cure in the Sea Emperor Leviathan. But something had gone wrong. The infection had escaped containment. The architects had died or left, leaving behind only their automated systems. Riley went deeper still, following the coordinates to the disease research facility. He passed through the inactive lava zone, where the ocean floor glowed with heat and lava flowed like water. He encountered sea dragon leviathans, massive creatures that spat molten rock and could crush his prawn suit with their jaws. Finally, Riley reached the disease research facility. The structure was damaged. Its containment systems ruptured, explaining how the infection had spread into the ocean. Inside, Riley found evidence of the architect's research. He learned about Kara, about its properties, about how it shut down immune systems and rewrote genetic codes. But most importantly, he learned about the cure, Enzyme 42, naturally produced by Sea Emperor Leviathans. The facility contained a data terminal that provided coordinates to something called the Primary Containment Facility, deep in the lava lakes, beneath even the inactive lava zone. By this time, Riley's infection had progressed significantly. Green cysts had begun appearing on his skin. He could feel the bacterium working inside him, changing him. His PDA estimated that Kara would kill him within days if he did not find a cure. The last emperor Riley descended into the lava lakes, the deepest region of the crater. The heat here was intense. The water itself seemed to boil, and sea dragon leviathans patrolled the darkness. In the center of this hellish landscape, Riley found the primary containment facility. It was the largest architect structure he had yet seen, a massive complex powered by a thermal generator that drew energy from the planet's core. Riley navigated through its corridors, past containment cells for various creatures, past data terminals still recording information after centuries of abandonment. In the facility's heart, Riley found an enormous aquarium, a contained ecosystem kilometers across. And there, swimming slowly through the water, was the Sea Emperor Leviathan. She was massive beyond comprehension, easily one of the largest living creatures Riley had ever encountered. But she was also ancient and clearly dying. Her movements were slow, her skin showed signs of deterioration. She had been a prisoner here for 1,000 years. As Riley entered the aquarium, he heard a voice in his mind. The Sea Emperor could communicate telepathically. She spoke to Riley of her long isolation, of watching her eggs remain unhatched, of her failed attempts to reproduce in this prison. The architects had wanted her babies to produce the cure they so desperately needed, but she would not bring her children into this captivity. She had refused to release the enzyme that would trigger hatching, no matter what the architects tried. The Sea Emperor explained that her enzyme production had degraded with age. She could produce enzyme 42, but only in an unstable form that provided temporary relief from Kara's symptoms. For a permanent cure, Riley needed the enzyme from her babies. But after 1,000 years of refusing, the Sea Emperor had reached a decision. She would help Riley, not because he asked, but because she sensed something in him. He had chosen to venture into the depths to save himself. He had persisted against impossible odds. He had shown the will to live that she respected. The Sea Emperor made Riley an offer. She had 5 eggs, still unhatched, still waiting. If Riley would help these eggs hatch and allow her babies to swim free into the ocean, she would provide him with the knowledge needed to create the hatching enzymes. Her babies would produce the stable form of enzyme 42, and Riley could cure himself. Riley agreed without hesitation. The Sea Emperor told him what she needed. Specific plants from different biomes across the planet, each containing compounds necessary for the hatching enzyme. She guided him to alien gates within the aquarium, portals that connected to locations across the crater where these plants grew. Riley gathered the necessary flora. He returned to the aquarium and used the architect technology to synthesize the hatching enzymes. He applied these enzymes to the 5 eggs. The eggs began to glow, cracks appeared in their surfaces, and one by one, 5 juvenile Sea Emperor Leviathans emerged, small only by comparison to their mother, each still larger than Riley's Cyclops. The babies swam around the aquarium, exploring their new world with innocent curiosity. They played with each other, looped around their mother, and investigated the strange human who had helped them hatch. As they moved, they released clouds of enzyme 42, the stable form, into the water. Riley swam through the enzyme clouds, and his PDA registered the change immediately. The Kara bacterium in his system was being destroyed. The infection that had been slowly killing him was neutralized. The cysts on his skin began to fade. Within minutes, Riley Robinson was cured. The baby Sea Emperors approached one of the alien gates at the far end of the aquarium. Their mother encouraged them to leave, to swim free in the ocean, to live the lives she had been denied. One by one, they passed through the portal. The Sea Emperor remained behind. She was far too large to fit through the gates. She had known when she agreed to help Riley that she would spend her final days in this prison. But her babies were free, and that was enough. Riley never knew what happened to the Sea Emperor after he left. She died there, in the aquarium, alone but content, having finally achieved the one thing that mattered, her children's freedom, deactivation, and discovery. With the cure in hand, Riley synthesized more enzyme 42 using the samples the baby Sea Emperors had left behind. His PDA confirmed that he was no longer infected with Kara. For the first time since the crash, his body was completely free of the bacterium. Now Riley could disable the quarantine enforcement platform. He returned to Mountain Island, entered the alien facility, and approached the control terminal. This time, when he interfaced with the system, the scan completed differently. No infection detected. The terminal accepted his command. With the press of a key, the ancient weapon system powered down. The glowing emitters dimmed. The targeting systems went offline. After 1,000 years of vigilance, the quarantine enforcement platform ceased its watch over the planet's skies. Ships could now approach or leave planet 4546b without being destroyed. But Riley's task was not yet complete. To construct a ship capable of leaving the planet, he needed access to the rocket platform. His PDA had detected its location from Aurora's logs, a large island with a plateau suitable for construction. But to reach that location, he needed to navigate through one of the most dangerous regions of the crater. Riley found the rocket island, later designated as the crash zone. The Aurora's wreckage dominated the nearby waters, still leaking radiation despite his earlier repairs to the drive core. Reaper leviathans patrolled the area, their hunting calls echoing through the water. On the plateau, Riley discovered an ancient architect facility. It contained manufacturing technology far beyond anything humanity had developed. The structures included a rocket gantry, all systems still functional after centuries. But to activate these systems, Riley needed power sources and control modules scattered across the crater in various architect facilities. Riley spent weeks gathering the necessary components. He ventured back into the lava lakes to retrieve ion cubes from thermal facilities. He explored small architect caches hidden in various biomes, solving environmental puzzles to access their contents. He scanned and analyzed technology using his fabricator to create the components the ancient platform required. During his travels, Riley continued to discover data terminals containing architect records. He pieced together more of their story: the scope of the Kara outbreak, the desperation that drove them to this planet, the tragedy of their research. He found personal logs from architects who had worked in these facilities, their words translated by his PDA into approximations of human language. One terminal contained a message that seemed directed at anyone who might find it. The architect who recorded it acknowledged that they had failed to contain Kara, had failed to find a cure before their civilization fell. But they hoped that whoever discovered their facilities might learn from their mistakes. The message ended with coordinates to data storage facilities across the planet, suggesting that more information about their research could be found there. Riley also discovered that the 5 baby sea emperors had indeed spread throughout the crater's waters. His sensors detected concentrations of enzyme 42 appearing in various locations. The peepers, those small fish the sea emperor had trained so long ago, were now distributing the enzyme with unprecedented efficiency. The ecosystem was beginning to heal. Fish that had shown symptoms of infection began to recover. Species diversity increased as Kara's influence waned. The planet was slowly coming back to life, returning to what it might have been before the architects arrived with their terrible plague. The Neptune rocket, with all necessary components gathered, Riley activated the rocket platform. Ancient systems came online, and the platform began manufacturing a spacecraft using architect technology combined with blueprints from Riley's PDA. The rocket took shape over several days, assembled by automated systems piece by piece. The Neptune rocket, as Riley designated it, was unlike anything humanity had built. It incorporated architect materials and propulsion systems, making it capable of escaping the planet's gravity well and reaching orbit despite being constructed from relatively limited resources. The craft had just enough space for one person and minimal supplies. As construction neared completion, Riley recorded logs about his experiences on planet 4546b. He documented the alien technology, the ecosystem, the locations of various facilities, and most importantly, the story of Kara and its cure. This information would be crucial for Altera and humanity to understand what had happened here. Riley also made a decision about the planet's fate. In his database, he could see Altera's likely response to his reports. The corporation would want to exploit the planet, harvest its resources, study the alien technology, probably establish a permanent research facility. They would industrialize this world. But Riley had seen what Altera's pursuit of profit had led to. The Aurora's secondary mission to search for the Degasi, a rescue attempt that had killed 157 people when the corporation's ship triggered the quarantine system. The Degasi's own crash, caused by Paul Torgal's decision to perform an illegal scanning operation in search of resources, to claim the planet had suffered enough from outside interference. The Sea Emperor's babies were free for the first time in generations of their species. The ecosystem was healing. The Architect's facilities, though abandoned, still held knowledge that could help future researchers understand Kara and perhaps prevent similar outbreaks. When Riley filed his final report to Altera, he chose his words carefully. He documented the crash, his survival, the alien technology, and the cure for Kara. But he also recommended that Planet 4546b be designated as a protected zone off limits to commercial exploitation. The alien facilities should be studied, yes, but carefully, by research teams, not by corporate operations teams looking to strip mine the ocean floor. Riley knew Altera might not honor such recommendations, but he could at least try. The Neptune rocket was ready. Riley performed final checks on its systems, loaded his supplies, and took one last look at the ocean that had been his home and prison for months. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, he could see shapes moving beneath the surface. Peepers carrying their precious enzyme, stalkers hunting in kelp forests, reefbacks drifting slowly through the shallows. Riley climbed into the rocket's cockpit. The hatch sealed. Systems activated. The countdown began. At 0, the rocket's engines ignited. Architect technology, dormant for a millennium, functioned perfectly. The Neptune rocket lifted off from the platform, rose through the atmosphere, and broke free of the planet's gravity. Riley Robinson looked back at planet 4546b, watching it shrink below him. The blue ocean world, with all its beauty and danger, fell away into the distance. The quarantine was ended. The infection was cured. The Sea Emperor's children swam free. His PDA informed him that it was transmitting a distress beacon and that rescue ships would likely intercept him within days. Riley settled in for the wait, allowing himself to relax for the first time since the Aurora had been shot down. He had survived. Aftermath and echoes. In the years following Riley Robinson's escape from planet 4546b, Altera Corporation did indeed attempt to establish operations on the planet, but they found it more difficult than expected. The planet's ecosystem, now free of Kara's suppression, proved remarkably resilient and in many ways hostile to industrial operations. The local fauna, particularly the larger predators, showed little fear of human equipment. More significantly, when Altera scientists attempted to access some of the deeper Architect facilities, they triggered automated defense systems. Warpers, still following ancient protocols, attacked intruders. Some facilities proved impossible to breach without triggering self-destruct sequences. The corporation eventually established a small research outpost on the planet, but the large-scale operations they had envisioned never materialized. The cost-benefit analysis did not favor major investment, especially given the planet's distance from major trade routes and the risks involved in operating there. Planet 4546b remained largely as Riley had left it, an alien ocean world scarred by ancient tragedy, but healing in the slow way that ecosystems heal. The 5 Sea Emperor Leviathans grew, matured, and eventually reproduced, establishing new populations in different regions of the crater. Their enzyme production ensured that Kara would never again devastate the planet's life. The Architect facilities remained silent monuments to a civilization that had reached heights humanity could barely imagine and had been brought low by something too small to see. Research teams occasionally visited, carefully documenting the technology and trying to understand the language and culture of these long-vanished beings. In human space, the story of Riley Robinson became something of a legend. The non-essential systems maintenance chief who had survived alone on an alien world, who had cured himself of an infection that had destroyed an ancient civilization, who had disabled a weapon system and escaped in a rocket built from alien technology. The story was embellished in the telling, as such stories often are. But the core facts remained impressive enough without exaggeration. Riley himself gave few interviews about his experiences. He filed his reports with Altera, answered the necessary debriefings, and then largely stepped out of the public eye. Those who knew him said he had changed during his time on planet 4546b. He had left as a maintenance worker and returned as something else. A survivor, certainly, but also someone who had seen things most humans never would. In his private logs, the ones he did not share with Altera, Riley recorded his thoughts about the Sea Emperor. He wondered if she had felt fear during her 1,000 years of captivity, or if her intelligence operated on a level where human concepts of fear and imprisonment did not apply. He wondered what she had thought during those final moments, watching her children swim away to freedom while she remained behind. He also wondered about the architects. What had become of them? Had they found a cure for Kara on some other world? Had they survived as a species? Or had the plague destroyed them utterly, leaving only their empty facilities scattered across the galaxy as monuments to a civilization that once was? The answers to these questions remained unknown. The architect data terminals on planet 4546b contained no information about the fate of their civilization after the quarantine was established. Perhaps other architect facilities on other worlds might hold those answers. Perhaps not, the far north. What Riley Robinson did not know, and what would not be discovered for several years after his departure, was that the story of planet 4546b extended beyond the crater, far to the north of where Riley had crashed. In Arctic waters covered with ice and battered by fierce storms, lay another region of the planet, Sector 0. This area had its own secrets, its own architect facilities, and its own story. Within a vast ice cave in Sector 0, an architect consciousness named Al-An waited in digital storage. Al-An was the one who had taken the sea dragon eggs so long ago, whose unauthorized experiment had led to the containment breach. For 1,000 years, Al-An existed as pure data, unable to interact with the physical world, unable to correct the mistakes that had doomed both the architects and this planet's ecosystem. Al-An's storage facility had suffered damage over the centuries. The data structure was degrading. Without intervention, the stored consciousness would eventually corrupt beyond recovery. But Al-An could not save itself. It needed someone with hands, someone who could manipulate physical tools, someone who could construct what was needed. It needed someone who could brave the hostile environment of Sector Zero's frozen seas. In time, that someone would come. But that is a different story, one that would unfold years after Riley Robinson escaped into space. The legacy. The complete story of planet 4546b is one of tragedy and hope intertwined. It begins with the architects, a civilization of unimaginable age and sophistication, brought to the edge of extinction by a bacterium. It continues with their desperate search for a cure, their discovery of the Sea Emperor Leviathans, and their failure to respect the boundaries of another intelligent species. The story encompasses the Degasi survivors, Paul Torgal, clinging to authority and caution, even as both failed him, Marguerite Maida, defiant and aggressive, surviving against impossible odds, and Bart Torgal, caught between them, doing his best to understand an infection that killed him in the end. It includes the crew of the Aurora, 157 people who died because ancient automated systems still guarded against an infection most of them had never heard of. And it centers on Riley Robinson, who found himself alone on an alien ocean world and chose not to give up, who descended into the planet's deepest places and discovered truths about civilizations, plagues, and the price of captivity, who helped 5 baby leviathans swim free and, in doing so, saved both himself and the planet's ecosystem. The ocean of planet 4546b holds many more stories in its depths. Creatures that live and hunt and die in eternal patterns, ecosystems adapting to changes both gradual and catastrophic, secrets still hidden in architect facilities, yet undiscovered. Some of these stories will be uncovered by future explorers. Others will remain mysteries, known only to the planet itself. But the central story is complete. The quarantine has ended. The infection is cured. The Sea Emperor's children swim through healing waters. The planet endures, scarred but alive, a testament to the resilience of life and the consequences of actions taken in desperation. Somewhere in the ocean's depths, in the primary containment facility, in an enormous aquarium that had been a prison for 1,000 years, the body of the last adult Sea Emperor Leviathan rests on the seafloor. The automated systems still maintain the facility, still provide light and circulation, but there is no one left to contain. The architects are gone. Their civilization fell to the plague they sought to cure, but their technology remains, and their story is preserved in data terminals for others to discover and learn from. The ocean continues its eternal movements. The tides rise and fall. Creatures hunt and feed and reproduce. The water cycles through processes unchanged for billions of years. Planet 4546b exists as it always has. A world of water and life, indifferent to the dramas that play out on its surface and in its depths. In the end, the planet survives. The species adapt. The ecosystem heals. And the ocean, vast and ancient and patient, keeps its secrets and its stories, offering them only to those brave enough or desperate enough to venture into its depths in search of answers. The story of Planet 4546b is not just about survival or alien civilizations or ancient plagues. It is about the connections between living things, between the architects and the Sea Emperor they imprisoned, between that emperor and the peepers she trained, between the peepers and the ecosystem they helped save, between Riley Robinson and the planet that nearly killed him, but ultimately let him live. These connections, formed across species and time, are what transformed tragedy into hope. The architects failed to find their cure, but their research gave Riley the knowledge he needed. The Sea Emperor spent 1,000 years in captivity, but her sacrifice freed her children and saved a planet. Riley survived alone, but his actions ensured that others would not have to face the same quarantine that had killed so many. And so the story ends where it began, in the ocean, in the depths, where life continues its ancient patterns, and where perhaps other stories wait to unfold in the darkness below. The ocean is silent now, save for the calls of creatures echoing through the water. The facilities stand empty, their lights still glowing, their systems still running, waiting. The planet turns beneath its alien sun, and the endless sea reflects light that has traveled across the galaxy to dance on these waters. Somewhere in the depths, 5 young Sea Emperors swim through the darkness, their bodies glowing faintly, leaving trails of bioluminescence in their wake. They are free, as their mother wished, to explore this vast ocean world and all its wonders. And far above, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the gravity well, a single escape pod drifts through space, carrying a survivor home, carrying a story that will be told and retold, carrying hope that even in the darkest depths, even in the most desperate circumstances, life finds a way to endure. This is the story of Planet 4546b. This is the story of survival. This is the story of Subnautica. Thanks for watching. If this journey helped you relax, you can support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.